Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Let's Be Neighbors for our second one on housing. This is Rent Housing Without Equity, and we are so happy to have you here. We have some fantastic panelists lined up, and I will be introducing them in just a minute. But let me first do a couple of housekeeping things. If you have more than one person on your screen, if you could just type that in the chat, how many people are there, that gives us a better scope of our numbers and just how many people we're serving and how we can tailor these programs better for you. And a big part of this presentation or this event, this panel, is your participation. This is really for you guys. We want your input, your feedback. This is direct connection with topics of high community interest, and housing is a big one right now. And so if you have something specific to rent, just start putting it in the chat. If you see it, something that pops up during the presentation, we'll be gathering all of those the entire time during our panelists, and we will be asking them all at the end. So don't be shy, feel free to put them in as they come, and we'll get to as many as we can. And so for our panelists, just so we can get the focus on them because they are the experts here, we have first, we're going to be hearing from Heather Lester. She is the Housing Mediation Coordinator for Utah Community Action. She specializes in tenant-landlord mediation and has a wealth of knowledge on all things on rent and what to expect, resources. She's going to be fantastic. Next, we will have Tara Rollins, who is the Executive Director for the Utah Housing Coalition. She has been in that position for 20 years almost or more. She was the first executive director, and she's been in this entire time. She's been a high advocate for affordable housing, and she does remarkable work, and she's a wealth of knowledge. And we're lucky to have all of them here. And then last to finish it out is Mackenzie Walsh, who is the financial education team lead for the AAA Fair Credit Foundation. It's a nonprofit that helps people with financial coaching and how to get to that leap from rent into a place of equity, of owning a place of your own. And so with that, we are going to start straight in with Heather, and we are so grateful that you're here tonight. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was an awesome intro. I'm happy to be here. I guess we just start out with sharing the PowerPoints, right? Yes. Let me not technology mess it up here. Did it work? Sorry.
It's starting to share, so yes.
Okay, perfection. Let's just start there. I could show, there we go. Okay. Anyway, as she said, I'm Heather Lester. I'm a landlord-tenant mediator. I work over here with Utah Community Action. And so basically just starting out, obviously introducing Utah Community Action, but really landlord-tenant mediation, because Utah Community Action does so much. I'm just a small piece of the housing department within Utah Community Action. And so, when people talk about housing needs, affordable housing, then mediation comes up. And it's really taken off as far as just a topic. Sometimes it's referred to as mediation or eviction diversion. It's just like the interceder between the legal community, housing resources. So I wanted to start the slideshow of mine specifically with what is landlord-tenant mediation. So you can kind of see, obviously, on the screen, short of reading it to you, basically mediation it's a neutral-based process. Unlike the representation for legal services, it doesn't represent the person, it actually represents the situation. And so when housing resources are available, people go through a housing crisis, people are losing their housing, mediation can intercede with a lot of those conversations. So again, it's neutral based. No, it's not advocacy. It's not activist mentality. Very solutions driven. We're trying to make the gray areas filled in, if you will. So it's very loose and available for a lot of creativity, which is one of the reasons why I love mediation. Basic crisis management, communication. It's basically a communication crisis intervention type of tool. A lot of the things we have to communicate, though, with what it is not, because a lot of times, especially when you're dealing with folks that are in crisis and unsure of what resources are or unsure of where to go next, then it becomes like you're representing me. And while it may seem that way, it still has to be a neutral party. There has to be communications on both sides. And I think through that, non-representation part and the neutrality that allows us to kind of intercede where other folks can't and other positions can't. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what landlord-tenant mediation is. When you basically, the order might be off, but anyway, with the mediation experience, I wanted to highlight this specifically too, because we're going to talk a ton about housing. We're going to talk about affordable housing. We're going to talk about how you get through crisis. Mediation specifically allows, according to the slide, so mediation allows to provide interaction and engagement upstream. We hear this a lot because people don't get the difference between upstream and downstream. A lot of the focus is upstream. Of course, all the things that are happening right now with our good friend COVID, and it's been a lot of catching and running and trying to keep up. But upstream is really where the eviction diversion happens, the eviction prevention happens, the non-filing of evictions happen, trying to intercede before all of the legal things take over. So that's been a big push for mediation even prior to the beginning of this year. So this program has been in effect for about 5 years. I've been in this position for about 5 years. We were initially just Salt Lake County and Tooele County, but as of January 1st, which is super exciting, as of last month, we've now became statewide. And so we're working with all the different CAP agencies throughout the state of Utah to provide mediation services, tenant education. So it's not just fix my crisis or what do I do or where do I go. We can actually really engage with folks now and have those conversations to help people get to sustainability. So anyway, upstream and downstream, that's the difference and kind of where the line is drawn from, the housing crisis versus the housing or rehousing issues that come with eviction filings. The strategy that we use, and this is obviously flexible because all we do is flex. It's always in the gray areas. This is the general model, though, that we're doing within our team and how I've practiced the last 5 years. So we always have to define the ask. And I think anybody that's listening and anybody that has an eviction or housing situation, I hate to call it crisis because not always is it a crisis, but we have to define the ask. Sometimes mediation isn't the right solution. Sometimes it's the perfect solution. So we have to define the ask and help to pivot. If it's where they need legal advice, then of course it would be legal resources. If it's, it's not a funding issue, we don't actually provide rental assistance, but we work with the different agencies and options and resources that do. So it's really defining the ask to see how we can blanket over the problem. So then with that obviously comes determining the facts. We figure out a plan, different options, maybe a plan B, desired outcomes. It's kind of trivial when we actually talk about desired outcomes because a lot of times people don't really want to be there. Like they're miserable anyways. The conflict is outside of just your normal, I had COVID and I can't pay my rent. It's a lot of things that go into housing issues outside of just pay or vacate. So understanding the desired outcome is about staying or stabilization or retention. And sometimes it's not about that. And it's actually just about principle and getting the last word. So a lot of times we have to talk through a lot of things and we come out with some pretty good solutions. So the education element, of course, is in there. I don't think you can have mediation. I don't think you can have even renting in Utah, for that matter, without having some basis of tenant education, landlord eviction education element. So we always try to train. We'll go into the toolkit in a little bit just to give you the information for that. It's a wealth of knowledge and it's just all compacted into one booklet. So it's pretty exciting. I love to teach with that all the time. Again, back to the strategy, it really comes down to the whole process. Once we get the intervention and the buy-in from both parties and the allowability to have the mediation conversation, then it comes to the agreements and then the resolution and then the next steps and the follow-through. So that seems a long-winded process, but it's really not. Literally, it can be quick and fast, a day or two, sometimes even with court, an hour or two. It just kind of depends. So within this PowerPoint, we're going to kind of go over, that was mediation introduction, in case you didn't know what it was. But we're going to go into tenant tools and tips, tenant takeaways. We're going to talk about landlords. We're going to talk about eviction type of notices. And then we'll lead back into like what can I do? How can I get help? Where do I go? So with tenant tools, there's so many things that tenants come with, and it doesn't usually start from the beginning. You don't sign a 12-month lease and assume that you're going to get evicted in 2 months. And so tenant tools seem kind of trivial when you're talking about them initially, because I don't need any tools. I've got a great brand new lease. I actually found an apartment that's affordable, and I got approved and everything's great. So the tools really come into when things get a little sticky or something happens, loss of job, medical issues, COVID, for example, anything that can intervene with any of those terms within the lease agreement that you signed. So these are just the main things we always try and help folks with. If you're signing a lease, read and review all of the pages of your agreement. Sometimes that's lengthy. I've seen pages upwards of 30 plus pages. It's a lot, but they're in there for a purpose. And so making sure that you know what's in there is crucial. Understanding the terms, the amounts, the expectations before signing. A lot of that comes down to the terms of how long is my lease? When is the lease due? What types of fees are outside of the normal base rent? Those types of things. So understanding that, and then always ask the questions if it doesn't make sense. There's a lot of times people just assume that I can afford this apartment for $950, or I just threw that out there, but whatever amount, let's just say $950 for fun. Anyway, so then there's a bunch of other things that go along with that. There's fees, there's addendums, there's concessions, all of these types of things. And by the time you calculate it per month with your budget, you're looking at maybe potentially upwards of $1,100 or $1,200, give or take utilities, etc. So just understanding those questions, what's included, what's not, and then of course retaining all the copies of anything that you signed, anything that was given, any house rules, anything that goes along with the lease when you did that, exchange to get that unit. The hardest part to because you're so excited, you don't want to take away the element. It's like getting a new car, or anything that's an exciting purchase, that you sometimes don't ask the questions and people assume a lot of things. And it's in the favor of the tenants because it's the landlords, because it does leave a lot of subjectability, for lack of a better word, subjectability, because if you assume that if it's not in there, it must not matter. That's not correct. If it's in there, it's in there for a purpose. If you need clarification, clarify with the purpose, because the agreement is a legal binding document, and it is based around Utah law, according to like basic contract law. It is something that's signed and has multiple parties. So those are just the initial tenant tips and tricks, tips and tools, whatever you want to call it. As a tenant, some of these titles, I know it's kind of cliche, but as a tenant, clarity is gold. And, we all want to get the gold. So it's basically like, what is it? Why are we here? Basically what, where, why. So these are the things that I initially referenced in the previous slide, but just talking about the different things that happen within a lease. As a tenant, it's confusing enough because you're in a unit, you're budgeting, you're figuring all these things out, hoping and praying that life crises don't occur, but you still have to take into account like late fees. There's eviction fees. There's early termination stuff in case you happen to need to leave your lease before the term. There's dates, due dates, notice dates, grace periods. I mentioned concessions and addendums before. Those are usually the things, and I usually get the look, right? The side eye, like, what is that? But concessions and addendums are things that are outside of the back part of the lease, like maybe a parking stall or a garage or some sort of a utility. Maybe cable could be an addendum, cable services or cable package, if you will, could be added on to the back of an addendum. So just know that those are just as binding as the general lease that you signed. Expectations are there, HOAs, lease terms, shared spaces, house rules. Anyway, it kind of lists them all there. Of course, for purposes of not making the slides 300 pages, I obviously didn't list all of them. But basically, legal contracts are never simple. Now, we go into landlords. And I don't know if I'm talking too fast or how my time is. I'm sure somebody will give me a big flag. But talking about the landlords. So let's hear it for the landlords. A lot of times landlords get either not enough credit or too much bad vibe. I've worked with both. And so as a team, we definitely advocate for the best win of the situation. Sometimes that win is not always in the favor of the tenant. Sometimes the landlord's reasonable and the tenant's not, and vice versa. So I always like to make sure that I'm pitching both sides of the fence, because there's a lot of landlords out there, especially private landlords, that have really struggled, especially over the last year and a half to 2 years. So why do landlords do what they do? This is actually direct feedback from relationships that I've had with landlords, not just private, big, bigger, big box type of landlords as well. So with landlords, it's personal because the tenant is having a crisis, but they're expecting the landlord or the property manager or the owner or whomever to actually understand. While they're human, it's not personal, it's a contract. And then it's a person versus the expectation of the job. Even if sometimes they feel and they try to go out of their way and help, why don't all of them do that? And it's difficult, right? Because I think the expectation of the job and making sure that their job duties are there, but at the same time still managing that humanistic approach to really get you to the finish line and help you work through your crisis. It honestly is situational, though. Situation by situation, landlord per tenant. It really is something that mediation focuses on, because we want to try and build up that relationship, even if they're not buddies or friends or whatever. They're at least civil, and we're coming to a resolution that matters within the lease terms, and it actually fulfills the lease terms for both sides, even working through the crisis. And again, that's what mediation does. There's, again, with that personal touch versus the personal crisis, there's the problem we always end up having is multiple scenarios, situations, and I hate to just always refer back to COVID. There's so many other things that happened prior to COVID, but just having the allowances or the ability to give more lenience and more lenience and more lenience. And sometimes it has to come from both sides, not just the tenant, but the landlord as well. And so when they're giving the options, and really it is like, we have worst case scenario, best case scenario. And it isn't just throwing something at it to see if it sticks. It really is an entire range of conversation that can allow for a solution. Sometimes the answer isn't yes, and that's hard. A lot of people really have to go through the process. Sometimes landlords, tenants, mediators, whomever in between, we really have to actually digest and swallow the fact that sometimes the answer is not yes on certain apartments and certain housing units. And that's okay, because even if it's not a yes, it could be it's not a yes, but let's work through this to get you to your next step. Leases end, people don't re-sign leases, and that puts people in crisis. And at the same time, it happens on both sides of it. So sometimes the answer is not yes. And I always stand by it, and it's okay. Sometimes it's not yes. But in big, bold letters there, of course, you can see landlord-tenant relationships are work. Not just work for me, not just work for my team, not just work for anybody that's in housing, but it's work between the two parties that actually made the contract. You have to both work towards a solution.
Okay, Heather, about 3 minutes left, maybe 4.
Okay, I'll speed through. I tend to get wild on that, so I wanted to get to at least the eviction notices. So this is basically how mediation can assist and help landlords. Hey, landlords, mediation calling. This is what we do to actually help the landlords. Types of eviction notices. This is pretty much the crust of what I wanted to talk about. There's a lot of questions in the state of Utah as far as the types of evictions. People get misconstrued all the time with eviction notices. So I've listed there's 5 under the Utah statutes. 3-day notice to pay, 3-day comply, 3-day notice to vacate for nuisance, 5-day tenant at will. I'm really speeding through these, not only because I'm lacking time, but because I'm going to provide the toolkit at the end, and that actually goes into really good depth to help understand. The most common, of course, is the 3-day pay or vacate for the notices. This is a quick run through. I definitely won't spare you. I'll spare you the details because it's also in the toolkit as well. The landlord obviously must give notice. It talks about the court process. The 3-day notice potentially for pay or vacate can easily be misconstrued for the 3-day summons that's given when the eviction case is filed. So I really like to delineate between the two because the timeframes are different, how they're given to you is different, and how it and the timeframes of according to what the next steps are that could be detrimental. So I always like to mention that the making sure that if you have, I think what I don't even know what number it is, but if you have an eviction notice or any kind of court document, please always exercise your rights to get to the next step and respond to the court, because the default is really one of the things that is very difficult to get around. This page right here is actually in the toolkit as well. Same exact thing as the previous slide, but I just wanted to give you the visual. And again, it's in the toolkit. Mediation Services, we'll provide this. I think Heather and Kim will share this as well. This is as of January 1st. Anybody in the state of Utah can access mediation through the phone line, the email, indirectly. That's asking questions, maybe not knowing what your situation is. And then, of course, the direct, which is on our website, and the links right there for each of those, because there's a tenant request, landlords can access it, directly request mediation, and turnaround time is less than 24 hours for contact, just to make sure we're within that time frame of your crisis. Here we go. What we should remember from this. This will be my nice little tie-up. So sorry, I'm winded. Document everything. Of course, that's in the toolkit as well. Communicate often and consistently. Cooperate with agreements and arrangements, especially while you're working through anything that's going to try and keep you housed. Sometimes agreements go south and they don't understand the levity. They, as in both parties, don't understand the levity of keeping the arrangements that are made because they're binding. Resources are out there, and Tara's probably going to talk a little bit about those. I wish I would have had more time. Resources are out there. Please find them. Please use them. It's never been like it is now. And so the fact that you can stabilize yourself through any crisis is really in the tenant's favor, especially now. Eviction and court notices are vitally important. Always respond. Mediation is your friend. Of course, I have to plug that. Legal advice and resources are accessible. Always put your best foot forward in success in renting. And reach out to someone, anyone. Procrastination never serves anyone well. The time frames for eviction and housing and rehousing is so quick, and people don't really know what hit them after they get done freezing because they're just in crisis. So helpful information. I'm sure Kim and Heather will share this as well. There's the toolkit information. Obviously, within the resources section is all of the legal resources and all the contact information there. And of course, Utah Rent Relief, which I'm certain probably Tara will talk about a little too. So anyway, my name is Heather Lester. I'm super sorry I talk fast, but I am so happy to be here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Heather. That was such a wealth of information so fast. I don't envy.
I know, it's so much.
To cover that breadth. Luckily, because we have, as Tara starts pulling up her slides in a second, but luckily we will be having this recorded. And so you can either pause for those resources or do a quick Google for the Utah Community Action and all of the Utah Housing Coalition. They have toolkits for renters. So if you're a bit, deer in the headlights over that, the resources are there for landlords and tenants. But I'm not going to take any time at all. So Tara, take it away. You are gold, so go for it.
Thank you for having me. And I'm really excited. I love talking about housing. And I want to, again, Tara Rollins with the Utah Housing Coalition, and we are a membership-based organization that is all about trying to increase housing people can afford in our state. And so I want to just comment on one of the things that Heather talked about, and that was the fact that landlords are gold. and I just want everybody to understand, when I'm going to do a little quick thing, when you're dating someone, what's really important about building that relationship is honesty, being dependable, doing what you say you're going to do. But then when you add money to any type of relationship, it totally changes. And I think, adding a landlord into your relationship, you really need to think about the asset that they have and that you are actually just borrowing. So I just wanted to put that thought in. So I think people don't understand what affordable housing is. And, we all need affordable housing. And so I mean, I like to start off by saying that. And, we're going to talk a little bit about, there's a big, NIMBYism saying, no, not in my backyard. Nobody wants to have affordable housing in their backyard. And affordable housing, like I said, we all need it. And so, we have, um, this sometimes people feel is affordable housing. And it's not. I mean, this is absentee landlords, people that, don't take care of their property. Think we have several properties, around that we call them eyesores. And let me tell you, these places, people are renting them for more money than they're really worth, because they have a hard time finding, housing, and, absentee landlords, take advantage of that. And, and they're not managed well, and they're not checking in. And so, then I go, to, yes, in my backyard, when you look at affordable housing, it's done extremely well. It's here are some pictures, of affordable housing that we have across the state, and they have amenities, and I would say they're very well managed. And here's why. When something comes in with a subsidy to the development, there's lots of partners there that have that are interested in this property, whether it is the developer, and then you have your investors, more than one investor. There's deed restrictions. There's inspections that are done. The state, if the state puts money in, they, have, interest in these particular properties. I want to say the one on the down on the far right corner, that is a project that has been done up in Park City. And so, well-managed places deserve a place in our community. And then we talk about, why do we, preserve, housing? And there's a thing called NOAA, which is natural occurring affordable housing. And we also have expiring properties that deed restriction is being lifted. But we have a lot of properties that people are living in and paying a third of their income to housing that are just naturally occurring without subsidies in them. And so these are some of the projects that have been preserved and, rehabbed in the inside to, bring them up to code and date. Because we do have, old stock, especially when it comes to Salt Lake City, in Salt Lake County. And it's worth preserving because it's there. They already have the land, etc. So it is really important that we look at investing, excuse me, in maintaining these properties. So I wanted to go in and talk a little bit about what our status is of housing. And right now, across Utah, there's a shortage of rental homes, and we have extremely low income households and whose incomes are below the poverty guideline of 30% of the area median income. And people go, what's AMI? All that. We're going to go over those numbers in a minute. We'll show you. We'll put some dollar signs to it. And so we have a lot of people that are severely, cost burden for the rent. And that's, paying more than 50% of their income to housing. So when you look at, our key facts for the state, we have almost 67,000 extremely low income people. And that's people that are making 30% or below. And as you look at that, that's 4 people in a household. That is 26,000. We're short, almost 45,000 units. And then when you look at, 71% of our extremely low are paying more than 50% of their income to rent. And affordable housing is paying no more than 30% of your income to housing. And that includes utilities. That would be your electric and also heating. And so when you look at only paying a third, 30% of your income, I'm sure if we really look and evaluate, many of us are paying more than 30. And so I wanted to go over what fair market rent was, because FMR is often used as well. And it's HUD establishes this every year for every county in the US. And but this doesn't mean that the landlord can't charge more. It's just a baseline for programs like our subsidized programs, like a Section 8 voucher can only pay market rate. And so right now, there's a really big difference between market rate and what landlords are getting. So we need to kind of get HUD to get those aligned a little bit better. And then we did talk a little bit about AMI. And so HUD also calculates that. When you're looking at, low income, and when they're talking about affordable housing as with subsidy or any program that you have to qualify for to live in their program, live in their property or use a voucher, these are some of the jargon that they use. And so 80% of AMI is low income. And that's it. And when you look at it, 80% is actually a lot higher than you would think. And then very low and extremely low, 30%. And so when you look at the different counties, we'll go to Salt Lake County, and the AMI, 100% is 90,000. And so when you look at 80%, 50%, and then 30%, you can see that it's extremely high. I think those numbers might be off a little bit. But as you can see, 30% is, only 19,000. And then when you look at it in terms of people's jobs, waiters and waitresses make $9.46 an hour. These come from DWS. We have almost 16,000 jobs there. Fast food and counter workers, 43,000. Cashiers, 30,000. Retail salesperson. As you can see, these low wage jobs, you can't even afford a 1-bedroom place, and at $16.71 an hour. That's what you need to make to be able to afford the averages in the state. And so as you can see, we have like over 200,000 jobs that are making less money than a 1-bedroom housing wage. And so whenever we're talking about, housing wage, it is what somebody needs to make to live in a 1-bedroom place. And so when you look at, affording, 0 bedrooms like a studio, it's $14.51 an hour. A 1-bedroom and then a 2-bedroom. This is definitely the average. We were looking at Lehigh earlier, and it was like $26 an hour. And we were looking at, I think it was South Jordan and over by Harriman, and it was like 26 something. So to be able to live there in a 2-bedroom. And so as you can see, that these are how many people are working in these particular wage categories. And then I just wanted to show you, we have a Utah housing profile. And when you look at, who our renters are, the myth is that nobody works, that is living, in, housing. I mean, in the subsidized housing. And in fact, 49% of them are in the labor force. We have 19% that are disabled. We have seniors, people that are going to school, single adult caregivers, and then we have other. And so, and then I want to point out that at 80% of AMI, we have 104 units available for every 100 that's needed. And so when you go down 50% of AMI, we only have 63 for every 100 that we need. And then at extremely low, we only have 32 units. And so then when you look at the cost burden, as you can see, people are just, severely cost burden when it comes down to extremely low. So when we are looking at building at extremely low income, it's really hard for somebody to be able to pay a loan and charge, rents at that low, and also be able to maintain the property, over time. And so that's why it needs a lot of equity to be able to, move that project forward. The best projects are really mixed income. So I wanted to talk about the five myths of affordable housing, because I think it's important that lots of people have opinion about this. So, the five myths of affordable housing are as follows. And so I'm going to talk about each one of those. Affordable housing lowers nearby property values. Well, that isn't true. There's lots of studies out there that state that, but when you really think about it, if affordable housing is managed well and it's designed well, it helps with property values. As well as we really do have some great architects here that have done some extremely nice work. Affordable housing produces more traffic while overburdening school and infrastructure. So the other thing was about crime. People believe there's a lot of crime. Well, if you plan it well, it isn't. Oh, crime is 4, sorry. If you plan it well, it is not. When you plan affordable housing, especially when you are using subsidies, you have to put together hire somebody to do a report to show the need that it, number one, it needs to be at these levels of income, is it a burden on the schools? I mean, all that stuff. So if it's really well planned out, it doesn't have a burden. And plus, we are seeing right now, some of our older neighborhood schools are closing because there's no kids. So having mixed communities is really important. Affordable housing is a government handout with little to no return on investment. I'm going to leave that one for a second to talk about, but affordable housing increases crime is false. Once again, if it's planned well, it decreases crime. And a lot of these units, especially when it comes to permanent supportive housing and housing people that are have mental illness or a subsidy of substance abuse, oftentimes, I mean, they have security that is there, 24/7. And so they're there to, react to anything that needs attention. So I think it's really important to know that, developers, and management companies are doing this. And affordable housing is ugly and looks cheap. No, they spend a lot of money on affordable housing. And I think that the architecture is really well done, and you would never know that it is affordable housing when you're driving down the street. So I'm going to end with this. I'm going to try to move my screen. Okay. It's really important for us to understand that where the government handout is going. So many people don't understand that homeowners are receiving, the biggest subsidy, and that is through mortgage interest deduction. No matter what their income bracket, has the benefit of the highest amount of federal housing subsidy in the U.S. The mortgage interest deduction is a provision of the U.S. tax code that allows homeowners to deduct from their taxable income the interest paid for mortgages on homes they occupy. And so it is, this will, you'll be able to see this in my slides. And if you have any questions about that, but I just want people to really understand that the HUD budget is so much smaller than the mortgage interest deduction. And we really need to take, a good look at, investing in the infrastructure that we need for our state to thrive. And, we talk about, low wage jobs, and, I tend to talk about the tourism. We have a lot of tourism here. And if we don't have the infrastructure for people to live and, stay in those jobs, it's costing, money elsewhere, like retraining people, as well as, excuse me, the lack of housing that people can find. So think about how many downtown, how many hotels there are. Think about how many chambermaids they need. I mean, how many people, the laundrying, doing laundry of all the, towels, etc. I mean, those are all low wage jobs. And it would benefit for us to be asking the question to these to tourist type jobs like that is, how can you, put in funding to help build housing that your employees can live in? Big box stores, when they come, the question should be, where are these people going to live? And usually it is, well, how much tax are we going to get out of it? So, we just need to start thinking about housing a little bit differently. And so Heather, how many more minutes do I have?
You have maybe a couple, like we're
Okay.
probably gonna push it a little bit, but yeah, 1 to 2 minutes, I'm thinking.
Okay, that's fine. So I'll just wrap it up. Heather said I was going to talk about some resources. And so the one of the things that I really want people to know is 211. That is the information and referral line, and you can call and ask them for housing assistance, housing mediation. You need a lawyer. You need this, you need that, whatever. I always say it's a place to learn how to rob Peter to pay Paul. So I need utility assistance so then I can pay my daycare. It's really important, when people like Heather had talked about when they're in crisis, we really need to have something available for people to get through that crisis so they don't lose their home. They don't end up, 6 months later at the shelter or living in the car. Having children, rotating in and out of schools is really, difficult for the teachers as well as the students. And, our healthcare is going to be so much better. I always say, opportunity starts at home. And so by making sure people have a home, they're going to shine. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tara. And as you started thinking of questions, either just put them in the chat now so we don't have a huge flurry at the end, but that was a ton of information. And if you didn't see it before, Heather Lester and us as the library were able to curate some of those resources. So their links are in the chat. And if not, for those listening to the recording, you can Google the Utah Housing Coalition. There's a renter's toolkit there, and it has a lot of them. But again, 211. You don't even have to remember that. Just that number is great. So we are going to turn our time over to Mackenzie Walsh, who is going to help with financial things of how to make that wonderful dollar stretch and get to the point where, yes, like make the home ownership leap, as her slide so brilliantly says. She's the beacon of hope. So we are going to give it straight away to her. Thank you, Mackenzie.
Took me a minute to figure out how to unmute. I'm so excited to be joining this evening, and as indicated before, my name is Mackenzie Walsh, and I'm a certified personal financial counselor and HUD housing counselor as well, and I work for Fair Credit Foundation. And we are, a little bit about us really quickly, we are a nonprofit organization with the goal in mind to help individuals and families to be able to improve their financial well-being. So we offer a wide variety of services, a lot of which are free, and some of them are listed here. So we do provide one-on-one financial coaching as well as credit counseling. We do workshops in the community as well as teach monthly classes. You're taking part in one of those, of course, tonight, and one of those opportunities we have to work with the community. We have a matched savings account, which is in IDA, or individual development account, which essentially is the savings is 2 to 1. So for every dollar that is saved, it gets matched 2, a cap of 3,000. So you save 1,000 and it gets matched 2,000 for a total of 3,000 to be used towards one of 3 purchases. So the start of a business, home ownership, and schooling. There is some income restraints, and so if you're interested to know if you or a dependent is qualified for that program, you can go to our website, faircredit.org, and there's like a 5 questionnaire that you can go and see if that might be something that you are qualified for. We do offer also as well payday loan help in the community. So if you or someone you know is finding themselves stuck in the payday loan cycle, and are having a hard time paying off, a 300% or plus higher payday loan, we work with a local credit union to be able to refinance that, so you can, one, pay that off at a 3% interest rate, as well as be building your credit in the process. We also have a debt management program, which is where we stand as the middleman between the creditor and the consumer to be able to help you be able to pay off your debts in full in 5 years or less. And then Utah Saves, I'm going to actually talk a little bit about more throughout the presentation. So I am going to wait to talk about that. So I have 3 tools and 3 resources I'm going to discuss this evening. And the first tool is that we need to create a SMART goal. We need to be smart about our finances. And of course, the SMART acronym is used for goal settings, not just in a financial setting, but in all aspects of our lives. But for particularly this example, I'm going to talk about a SMART goal, creating a SMART goal in regards to our finances. So the acronym, the S stands for specific, M for measurable, A for achievable, R for relevant, and then T for time bound. So one way in a financial setting that we can be able to put this into action is, I've given an example here. So let's say somebody's specific goal is that they're going to save in a savings account $6,000 for a down payment within the next 12 months. So broken down into a measurable way, they're measuring that by making sure that they're going to, by the end of that duration, have $6,000 in their checking, or they're going to be checking their progress on the banking app. It's achievable if they can save $500 a month, and within 1 year, they will be able to reach that $6,000. Now, if that seems too hard to bite off or chew, then of course that person needs to go back and figure out something that's a little bit more reasonable. It's relevant to them because they want a place to call home and they want to build equity. It's really, really important. I think all of us have set a goal that we haven't accomplished. That is really where the relevant factor comes in. So it's important that your goal is relevant. And then time bound. This person, it was for 1 year. I'd like to get in a home before the market gets any crazier. So that goal for them was 1 year. Who knows if the market will or won't get any crazier. So here was just a naked template for the SMART goal, but I think a lot of us are familiar with it, but it's just the word SMART spelled out, and then you break down the goal line by line. I really encourage my clients to be able to, with any goal, have a way of rewarding themselves. Now, the key thing is, however, that you don't want to over reward yourself in a way in which you will no longer, like, you won't see progress because you've undone everything you've accomplished so far. So this is an example that I give. The last slide, right? That person had a goal of saving $6,000. Well, maybe might make a timeline. Put down things that are free or not very expensive, and then put them on a timeline that when you hit that milestone, you might be able to reward yourself in that way. So if you hit $500, don't spend a lot of money, but maybe go get an ice cream cone. You hit $1,000, go swimming or ice skating or hot tubbing, whatever brings you joy. At $2,000, do something that's $20 to $30 that you enjoy, or upwards of $40. $3,000, you know, spoil yourself for dinner and a movie, because heck, we know movies are outrageous, so who can actually afford to do both? So that's a way for you to reward yourself. But think about what individually would be a progress for a small reward to help you feel the success that you're making, but without breaking the bank. Because it's really hard to think that you are making all this progress and that you can't do anything about it, but you can. The key is just small rewards. All right, tool number 2 is to cut back on unnecessary expenses. I really like this quote by Benjamin Franklin. It says, "Beware of a little expense. A small leak will sink a great ship." So the question that we each need to pose ourselves is, what little expenses are leaking into our life? On this next slide, I have some examples of maybe some leaky expenses that are happening to us or to people that we know. So I've got 4 different expenses here, and an average or a rough estimate as to what those things may cost. And if we're doing them daily, how much they cost, versus weekly, if we're doing them every day of the week, versus if we're doing them every day of the month, and then every day of the year. So let's say that somebody is buying a little vending machine snack, $150 if they're doing it a day, per week, $10.50. After a month of doing that, they're spending $45, and then in a year, just shy of $550. A coffee, you're spending maybe $3.50. We're doing an average. It's not Starbucks, but maybe it's not McDonald's. If you're doing that every day, it's $24.50. In a month, you're spending just over $100, and then in a year, shy of $1,300. Let's say you're eating out every day and you're getting something like a Wendy's $5 biggie bag. It's $5 for the day. If you're eating out at least $5, and the amount of $5 per day, that's $35 a week, $150 in a month, and then $1,825 in a year. Last example is, let's say you're buying a pack of cigarettes that on average costs about $7.50. If you smoke a pack a day and are buying one every day, that's $52.50 a week, $225 a month, and then $2,738 a year. So again, this is just to show you a leaky example, or a leaky expense example, as to what might make it difficult for us to be able to save. Emotions and finances go hand in hand, and so whenever we feel something, that might influence how we spend our money. So you have to think about, okay, what are my spending triggers? What emotions do I feel at times that are in turn making me spend money? So some examples we have here are boredom. Do you spend money when you're bored? When you get paid, is that when you spend all your money? When you're hungry, is that when you spend money? Man, I can tell you, I can go into a grocery store with just your basic like needs of milk, eggs, bread, butter, and I can come out, if I was hungry, with Chips Ahoy and with Fruit Loops and ice cream. I mean, granted, I am pregnant, so that doesn't help the factor either. And then forget everything else that I had on my list, you know, the reason I went in. So I don't know about you, but hunger is one for me. Peer pressure or our relationships with others, so people close to you, you know, does that have an influence on how you spend your money? But no matter what your spending trigger is, it's important to be thinking, okay, once you identify what the spending trigger is, how can I remove that, or how can I make it a little bit more difficult for me to do that? So for my example, I shouldn't go shopping hungry, or I should use grocery pickup so that I'm not overspending on areas that I don't need to. You can always delete online shopping apps, or better yet, just don't store your cards in those shopping apps, because then, again, maybe it's just me, but if I have to go get my credit card that's 300 feet in a different room, I might really think about that process versus if it was just saved and it was a click of a button. Always remember to wait upwards of 48 hours before purchasing something you want, or especially something over a certain threshold of, maybe $300, $400 that isn't a need. Just so that you don't regret your purchases. You can unsubscribe to email ads, and then of course you can leave your credit cards at home and only carry the amount of cash that you need at that time. Tool 3 is just save, save, save. So I've talked to you about 2 things that can help you start on the path of saving, and that is creating a SMART goal and then watching your expenses. But where do we save? Why is the savings important? There are lots of ways in which one can save. They can save in a bank account with a credit union or a bank. It's just important that you choose one with little to no fees. If you have poor banking history and you are unable to be banked right now, or you are currently unbanked, please reach out to us. We have an initiative called Bank On that the goal is for all Utahns to be able to have access to mainstream banking. So we want to make sure that you have access to that. If you are saving something for more long term, you could consider something like a money market account or a certificate of deposit, commonly known as a CD. You could consider doing an online savings account. These typically offer higher interest rates just due to the fact that they don't have a physical brick and mortar that they have to pay for building and staff, etc. Why shouldn't I save with cash? There's something called seasoned savings. And when it comes to home ownership, or when it comes to preparing for home ownership, lenders like to see that the funds have been in a bank account for at least 60 days or more. So when it comes to something like a down payment, they want to see that those funds are, quote, seasoned. And if they haven't been sitting somewhere for that long, it might be that it was gifted to you, or it was given in a grant. And if that's the reasoning, then a letter will most likely be required by a lender. If the worst thing that I've ever heard happen was somebody who had saved a decent down payment and they were in the closing process and they asked for the bank statements for them to prove how much they had saved for this down payment. And they literally had it, as a cash under the mattress scenario. And they had to withdraw from their offer because there was no proof that how long they had that money. So please, please, please understand the concept of seasoned savings and put it in a bank or a credit union. And if you don't currently have access to that, please reach out to us so we might be able to help you. Another tool that I wanted to talk about is to play house. So, you think about playing house as a child, but I'm talking about playing house as an adult. Let's say right now that your rent is $1,100, but you estimate that the type of home that you want is going to have a mortgage of around $1,700 a month. If you really want to test the waters to see if you're prepared to make the leap to homeownership, save the difference. Save that $600. Test the waters. Can you practice becoming that homeowner? If you were in this example, or in this specific example, this person, if they were to play house for 6 months, they would already have a successful $3,600 down payment. So it's important. It's really, really important that you maybe try practicing this out to see if you are in a disposition to do so. More tips for increasing your savings is going to be, once one debt is paid off, save the amount that you were paying towards that debt. You can save a tax return or a work bonus. You can work all available hours or overtime when possible. Look for opportunities with your current employer. Develop new skills and ask to be included in special projects. You can always consider starting a small business, but again, we don't want you to be pushed back. We were wanting you to move forward. So if that's not the answer, then of course don't go that way. and then be open to new employment if necessary. Again, please don't quit a job before you have one under your belt. Now I'm going to go over the last 3 resources. So resource number 1 is something called Utah Saves. It's an umbrella, a bigger umbrella of America Saves, but it goes down by state level. So we are Utah Saves. And all it is a simple pledge that you take. And next week happens to actually be Utah Saves Week. So I recommend that all of you go to utahsaves.org and commit to save today. It's not a bank account. All it is simply typing in what your SMART goal is. So here are the 3, they're kind of small, but 3 things that you would be filling out as you pledge. So I, Mackenzie Walsh, pledge to save money, reduce debt, and build wealth over time. And I'll encourage my family and friends to do the same. And then I indicate what I'm saving for. And then you say how much each month you're planning to save to be able to reach your goal over blank amount of months. You can opt into a monthly text reminder, as well as you can opt into a quarterly newsletter by becoming a Utah Saver. So again, next week is Utah Saves Week, and I highly recommend that each of you go to utahsaves.org to become a Utah Saver today. Resource number 2 is to consider taking a homebuyer education course. If you're wanting to take that leap towards from paying rent to becoming a homeowner and you're not quite sure if you're prepared or what you can do to prepare, consider taking one of these courses that would allow you to be able to know what puzzle pieces are missing. Here are just 3 that I did here in the Salt Lake County area. Of course, there are ones throughout the state. So if you're joining from a different part of the state, you can look it up online. But here are 3 different organizations, both Salt Lake Neighbor Works, CDCU, Community Development Corporation of Utah, and then also USU Extension in Salt Lake County does one. Most of them right now are all virtual or self-paced online. So you can definitely take that at an affordable rate and to be able to see where you stand, as well as a lot of these are HUD approved. In fact, all 3 of these are HUD approved. So if you buy a grant, are necessary to take a homebuyer class, these would all be what you would need to take. And that leads me to my next thought of consider getting a grant or a loan from the community if you're looking to purchase a home. What local education programs or grants from a lender or community grants might be available to you as a first-time home buyer, or maybe even as a second and beyond home buyer. See what's available out there in order for you to maybe have some help in making that leap towards homeownership. The last resource I wanted to consider each of you is to consider free financial coaching with Fair Credit Foundation. So we, as I mentioned, can offer one-on-one financial coaching where I or a colleague can take you step through step some of these things. What is your ultimate goal? What is your barriers to getting to that goal? Long-term or just one and done if you'd like, appointments to help you identify your financial goals. And common goals that often come up are increasing your savings, paying down debt, or building your credit score. One coaching client said, working with Fair Credit is helping me not only help me face and control my finances. So that's a little bit about us. Please take the step and the leap to whatever next financial goal that you have, and you can reach out to us via that phone number or online. And then of course you can follow us on any of our 3 platforms that we are on in social media. Thank you for letting me join tonight. I'll turn the time back over to Heather.
Thank you so much, Mackenzie. That was also just a wealth of information that was so positively wonderful, and it's such a good springboard and applies to so many situations, especially housing, but for anyone that's wanting to save. So that was wonderful. And thank you all. Thank you, Heather, Tara, and Mackenzie. This was fantastic. I'll give you guys a minute to fill in any extra questions as you're processing that information. And in doing so, I'm actually going to tie in our our previous, not panel, event of panelists on homelessness. because there is an update with that. If you haven't seen it yet, I just highly recommend everyone go watch it. It's very eye-opening. We had someone who's had lived experience with homelessness, and they were able to ask some very honest questions, hear her story, and also just kind of see where homelessness is going on a large scale. And we just found out just actually yesterday with the legislature, there's been $13 million, just shy of it, been awarded to help with affordable housing specifically for homelessness. And the cool thing is that they want your feedback on just public comment. And so let me pull that up for you. Like, you can actually do it. It's this Friday, so it's literally, the quick turnaround is very quick. So if you have any thoughts on homelessness, again, I highly recommend looking through the panel that we had where we had our experts talk about it. But I will put a link in the webinar as we start asking questions. You can also, and also if you can't attend at 10 a.m. on Friday, people work. There is also, I'll put in some email addresses that anyone can comment from now and through Friday as they're seeking public comment on what you as Utahns want to do with it. So it's a very unique and awesome way to engage, and is a direct correlation with our last event in January. So now we're diving straight into questions. And so feel free to add to this, and I will put that link in the chat. But let me go to the questions. Back at the beginning, you guys had so many good ones already. So this one was answered in the chat in specifics, but in general, what options does a landlord have if there is concern over illegal activity, where it's like something's highly questionable, and what steps does a landlord have to be able to take to protect their investment, but also make it a good habitable place for future tenants? And this becomes open to everyone. So Mackenzie, Heather, Tara, this is all for you guys.
I'll take it. Then Tara, I don't know if she's there, but yeah, I kind of answered Andrew in the chat a little bit. I was obviously busy typing and yapping, but there's a lot of options for landlords. When it comes down to just figuring out the right notice, documenting everything is important. Really, it's when you're trying to prove a nuisance versus a payment situation, it is a different threshold. And so just talking through that specifically for your situation to say, what notice do I use? That would definitely be a legal services question, which I can definitely give you those links and information to access. Talking through maybe some mediation to see if it's even, a situation where they could pay, catch up, remedy the situation. That's always a good effort. But again, trying to determine the actual notice that you're going to need. Again, legal services, but we can easily talk through that. I gave you my contact information too, so if that helps. I didn't know if Tara wanted to chime in, but that's pretty much and also UT Courts, I didn't put this on my resource list, but utcourts.gov has all of the information, even outside of the toolkit. A lot of it's very much mirrored, but that'll kind of walk you through the different types of notices too, and the thresholds and what has to be documented when you do happen to take it to court and file that for an eviction notice against your tenant.
Wonderful. We had two questions follow each other very closely about 30%, the famous 30% of your income should go towards housing. I've heard 33, maybe 35, but that sweet spot that seems impossible to hit. This one may be more for you, Tara, but everyone, actually Mackenzie might have thoughts on this as well. Is first of all, is that 30% your net, which is kind of post taxes, or is that your gross, where that's your original amount that you paid? Like, where do people factor in what they should be paying for a house?
It's gross. Gross
So
income. Yeah. And
pre-tax.
right. I mean, and this has been the golden rule forever. And so wages have, stayed here and housing costs has come here. And so when they're looking, for example, at the housing authority, when they're gauging how much they're going to allow you to go out and, rent a place, it depends on how many people in the household, how many bedrooms, etc. But it's based on paying 30% of your income to housing. And so they're really trying to set up people to be able to sustain the housing, plus you know, when they get raises and stuff, that they'll be able to, you know, move out of, you know, subsidized housing. And so they think that's really where the sweet spot is, to be able to have people, you know, grow. So.
I'll chime in here too, and just saying, like, on a home ownership perspective of that, it's really important for people to understand that it is the 30% gross, or really more so that lenders will look at your gross income in order to determine how much of a house you can afford. And the reason that's important for a consumer to understand is you may actually qualify for a house that is above that what you can really afford with your net income to pay. So I always tell people to just make sure that, you know, they look towards the lower side of what they were qualified for in terms of buying a home, or they might be finding themselves in a pickle really quick.
Wonderful. So this one's for you, Tara. Why do people have the myth they do about affordable housing? Where does it come from, and what can be done to change that culture, have a paradigm shift of yes in my backyard?
Well, it comes from really fear. I mean, when it comes to, you know, people, they're fearful. They don't want those people living in their neighborhood. It's taught, you know, behavior in some ways. It's, you know, what people talk about around, you know, the dinner table. Um, I can't really say that anymore because people don't eat at the dinner table anymore, do they? What happens in between commercials they talk about while they're eating. I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's a learned thing, and people, you know, talk about it. Oh, you know, they're just living off the government. It's like, you know, there's a lot of, you know, rich people that are living off the government as well. There's a lot of companies that are living off, you know, the government. And so we either can pay it, you know, I mean, I think on the front end or the back end, and it's more expensive to have people, you know, on our streets, the cleanup that's happening, you know, all that is extremely expensive. And had we invested in housing people can afford years ago, perhaps we wouldn't be in such a pickle we are now. Because housing has been an issue for a very long time, but people just didn't see it. They saw it a lot of times. It was, you know, I've been on the Hill forever, and the people are saying, well, yeah, my, you know, child went to college and, you know, they can't afford to live out in the community. And so, you know, they see it personally, but until it really starts, um, like the homeless situation and how it got out of control, you know, people don't understand that those are our neighbors. Those are people that play soccer with your kids, and you just don't know it sometimes. Um, I mean, I'm going to tell a quick story because it kind of illustrates how people can go downhill extremely fast. And so, one of the most disturbing things that I have ever seen in my life was going to work, and I used to work across from the shelter, and the cartels out there, and you know, lots of, you know, drug stuff happening. And this happened more than once. High-end SUV in my parking lot with a mother shooting up with her kids in the back seat in car seats. And so the whole opioid, you know, craze, and then they went to, you know, meth or heroin. And these are people that were living, you know, you know, in a really, you know, high-end house, let's say, as well. I mean, if they're, you know, driving, you know, BMW SUVs. And that was extremely disturbing. But that's how people start going downhill. I mean, what happens when the father finds out that that's happening? And where does she go? And then we see, you know, I see a woman who is, you know, walking down the street, and I think to myself, well, where was she, you know, a year ago? What's her story? well, that's just homeless. I mean, we don't see how many people are living in their cars. Had a senator call me and wanted me to help a person, wanted to know what resources there were to help somebody that he met when he went to get some car work done. And the woman that was helping him was living in her car behind where she worked. And so, I mean, we're seeing it every day. I'm sorry, was that too long?
I think Heather just has a question.
No, I was just going to
Sorry.
chime in on that too.
Okay.
I don't know if you can hear me. Is it working? Okay. I was just going to chime in on that too. It's the same exact thing. I mean, I know Tara and I share a lot of stories, work on a lot of similar cases together, but I put something in the chat about working homeless. And that's, there's the drug use, the reasons why people go down and go downhill quickly, but then there's even the folks that are trying to scrape and stay held up, and that's the working homeless population. And I work with folks all the time. I have, I won't go into a story too detailed, but just, being able to, the whole thing when kids had to transition online for school, mom was going to school, mom was going to work, 10-hour job. Grandma was in the car. They were all living in this minivan. Grandma would take the kid to McDonald's parking lot to access school on the Chromebook. So then, I mean, it's just not necessary. When you have an SSI income for Social Security for the mother, for the grandmother, and then the mom is working a full-time job, 10 hours plus, and still can't make it. So there's just lots of reasons, and it's just unfortunate we have to get through that gap somehow. So.
And that's fantastic comments that you say. Like, again, I would highly recommend if you haven't seen the panel on homelessness, I highly recommend it because they do talk about working homelessness, and it's a demystifying of what homelessness is, and it's the reason why we call that first one the unseen neighbor. And so yes, there's that. I love the dialogue, but like there's so many questions coming through. They're like, we're gonna have to push through on that, but I will push one up to the top that ties in with this about how do you address affordable housing? Like what is being done to make deeply affordable housing available? There's a lot of talk, especially at the legislature on this. Terry, you will know best, but basically what can be done to make it so that people can afford a place to live?
Well, first of all, we have two huge appropriations on the Hill right now, and one is for $128 million. It's 127 something, but let's say 128 million for deeply subsidized housing and permanent supportive housing. And that was the housing we talked about previously with, case management. We need that. We have so many people that need a safe place to live, and especially those who have mental health issues. And we really need to invest in that housing. We also have, 100 million for developers to access to build housing, and 50 million of it is for rural areas. And so we really need to support that. We also need to, support having it in our backyards and not being afraid of density. And not all dense housing is affordable. Let's just, put it there as well. But yeah, we need to all be supporting and all talking about the need to build an infrastructure for our economy, and that includes our lowest wage earners.
And I suppose, Tara, that's why it's the idea of yes in my backyard, where it's a good idea to welcome these developments and things to make it so that people can afford a place to live.
And you know what? When you have a diverse neighborhood, it is rich. It is so rich in so many ways that, especially because people can thrive. They meet other people of, of other professions, other, size families, culture, schools just do so much better when it's mixed income. I mean, when you really look at the avenues, and all the apartments there and all the single family homes that are just all mixed, and they are really expensive homes. So and they have great schools. I mean, let's do this right in the future. Let's start doing it right.
Awesome. All right, so 211, there's a question on that is, can people tell us what tenants or just people they know, if they're seeking resources for help with rent payments, utilities, what other resources does 211 cover? Like, what is the scope of 211?
Everything.
Well, everything. My wife is drinking too much. What can I do? My
TV,
yeah, domestic
TV,
violence. They
food pantries.
yeah, food pantries, but even off the beaten path stuff like trying to quit smoking, aging questions, anything. You just call and it's a resource for many, many things. I did put the link in there so you can go on and it's, categorized and stuff and you can and see, but housing is, one of the biggest, questions.
And I like it online too. I mean, going on the website's a lot easier than calling because you can tell somebody all of the things, but you're not writing fast enough for all the valuable stuff they give you. So online, really, you can just kind of put it in your cart, if you will, and then just have it all in one place. So it's pretty handy online. Their website's pretty cool.
They
So
also have
I
an
wanted,
application and a texting option as well.
Yep.
If you don't want to go that route.
Text.
if I could just, give one advice, it would be make sure your community members, your family members, your cousins, brothers, your book club are paying their rent.
Yes.
Rent eats first. And because if you get a 3-day pay or vacate and you don't take care of that, you're going to start accumulating 3 times the daily rent. And that is so expensive. If you stay for another 3 weeks, depending on how much your rent is, I've seen somebody owe $400 and something, and then next thing you know, it's $11,000, and you can't get out of that. You have to pay that. You will go to collection.
Yeah.
So pay your rent because it's financial crippling.
And I'm going to second that because my second ask is pay your rent. And in the instance that you find yourself in a rental crisis, if you get any documentation, any notice, anything, especially from the court, please, for the love of all things holy and pure, don't sit on it. You have got to respond to it. A default is extremely legally difficult to get out of, even if you can get to legal resources. You have to respond to court notices. It's not necessary to have a default at all. So that's my secondary ask from Tara's initial. Please. Did I mention please?
Oh,
Yeah, I did.
yes. Sorry, I was. I'm on mute. That was my bad. So I'm going to insert a quick question pertaining to that. What was the $11,000? Someone asked.
What was the $11,000?
Yeah. How did it accumulate?
So it rent, fees, the trouble damages, sometimes can be, like $7,000-8,000. Also have, your cable, all those extra fees. Sometimes is a foreclosure turnover, and I've seen that as much as $500 in the past. If you're paying for your parking spot or a garage, I mean, all the trash pickup, I mean, all those extra fees add up. And then what happens is you have to pay 24% interest on that until paid. And then if it goes into debt collection, they'll add another 40% onto it. So it is financially crippling.
And then all the time frames start differently too. So I mean, you go from the
Yeah.
principal amounts that start with the lease, and then you go through the threshold of when you're actually unlawfully occupying the unit when you shouldn't be after the expiration of the eviction notice. Let's just say you're still there and you're not leaving and you haven't been locked out legally yet. All of those days are 3 times the rental rate, plus all of the fees, the addendum amounts, etc. And plus, obviously the percentages that go with collections or garnishments or all of those things. So it definitely adds up quicker than you would imagine. It shouldn't be that way.
And
I agree,
right now,
Cindy.
there's no way to expunge it off your record. So when you go to find another rental, it's extremely hard to rent.
So yes, that's the underscore. Don't get behind on rent because it can be horrifically difficult to get out of.
And always always respond to court notices. That's going to be like, what's her name? Court notices. You don't have to remember my first name, just court notices, respond. That's all you got to know. That's it.
Okay, so there's some comments. They're not questions, but I will infer the question from it is that it's that it shouldn't be this way, that it's ridiculous. Like, is there any way to change that for the shock that is coming in?
It's honestly the way that the leases are written. There's a lot of there's a lot of the eviction laws that heavy into like normal contract laws within the state of Utah. And so eviction laws, the time frame is really accelerated. A lot of times, I mean, I always use the example every time I teach an educate a tenant or eviction education class where you get the notice, even if you know you're behind, you're going to obviously freeze at first, and then you're going to freak out. And then the third day, when you actually have that day left, is when you finally try to figure out resources, and it's generally too late. So the time frame literally could be slowed down, if at all. And then we did get a win a couple years ago, Tara and everyone, and I was so happy to be involved, that the pay or vacate was then changed from calendar days to business days, which allowed people to get access to banks, community resources, etc., for payment related type of rental assistance requests. So it's little chipping off as we go, but just the leases and all the leases are different. There's a standardized lease format. Sometimes I've seen different leases from private landlords to big box landlords to property managers to HOAs, mobile home parks, lot rents. All the different leases are there, but they vary slightly. So it depends. It really just is kind of determined on that. That answered your question in a whole lot of words. Yeah.
And Mackenzie popped something in the chat that I'll read here is that the court notice advice is important, not just for anything rental related, but anything medical, credit card debt, everything. So court notices, answer them.
Yes, anything court notice, answer them.
Okay. I think we are at time. I think we will wrap up with one more question. So maybe two. Let's see if we can do this. I'm not sure if you have expertise in this area, but if you do, weigh in on this one of, in the current highly priced economy, do you think that people are finding the lower interest rates are setting off the incredibly high purchase prices? And if interest rates go up, that might settle things a bit?
I mean, I'll answer this like not more personal versus in a professional setting. I mean, I don't know if anyone can, I don't know if there's been studies to that, but I would say yes. I think that more people are looking, it's the same issue even with a rental setting, right? There's not enough housing. Whether it's renting or buying, we are in a housing shortage. And so I think that people are intrigued to buy a home right now because of the interest rates, which are driving maybe more individuals to try and find a home, but they're finding that there are no homes. We currently actually rent just our basement to make it affordable for us to own a home. And we are renting to a couple who are trying to buy a home. They put $60,000 over asking for a home in North Salt Lake, and they were outbid by somebody who put $100,000 over asking. So I mean, this is the things that we're dealing with in terms of buying, and it's really no different with renting, right? It's just expensive when there's a lack, when there's a demand, the prices go up. But currently the interest rates are actually going up again. So I'm intrigued to see what will happen as the interest rates do continue to rise. If it will slow down people trying to buy, and more homes will seem available because people are like, well, forget it, I'm not going to buy now, it's not 2%. We'll see. I'm curious to see, but I think there is a correlation there.
Yeah, I think Mackenzie's absolutely right. There's other factors now involved, but I would say, you know, even 5 years ago, the interest rates were pretty low and people were able to buy more house. And also possibly buy under what they can afford so they can travel or do, you know, save for their kids' college. I mean, there was a lot more, you know, flexibility for people. But now, like her example is absolutely what's happening. We have no inventory. And the inventory we have is just not appropriate. um, you know, when you think about a housing stock, we really need no step entrances for people who are aging, people that have, you know, who are disabled or just disabled for 6 weeks. You know, it's so much easier if we have a no step entrance. You know, we need to start, you know, building, not just to build.
All right, so last question for this evening is directed to you, Mackenzie. Does Fair Credit, if I can get this question all the way correct, yeah, does Fair Credit Foundation or any other agencies you know help have resources for people who are freelancers, gig workers, self-employed, with info on qualifying and buying a home? Do you have any resources like that?
Yeah, really good question. So I guess I should identify that we ourselves aren't the ones who teach those homebuyer education classes. But when it comes to like the grants that are available out in the community that we might be aware of, we can absolutely help you to see if you would be so specific to our program. It doesn't matter what type of income you have, you know, it doesn't matter your business title or if you're working from home, if you're self-employed, there is no cap for services at Fair Credit. Now, specific to that demographic, no, not necessarily. We're not like we don't say no, but we don't have something specific for those individuals who are self-employed, if that makes sense. But we can definitely, if you were to send over your, you know, request of meeting with somebody, we can help you based off of what individual circumstances you're in with your income, refer you if we aren't able to help you individually.
Awesome. Okay, as a
I
final
think
wrap-up.
Mackenzie brings up a really good point. There are grant programs out there to help people with down payment. And 211 may know about that, but definitely, you know, Fair Credit knows. Utah Housing Corporation has first-time home buyer programs, etc. So, you know, there are things out there. People just need to educate and access them.
Hey, that may actually lead into my thing of like final wrap-up thoughts. Give some piece of advice of something people can do to take away from this and go into a positive direction. So if you want that to count as yours, Tara, or if you want to add anything else, we'll just kind of go around the circle and have any wrap-up thoughts before we close tonight.
Of course, I want to have another one. So I also want to just go one more time with this eviction thing because it's so crazy. If you get an eviction filed in the court, it will not come off your record. Okay. And so you need to make sure it doesn't, you know, land there. Even if you are cleared from it, it will stay on your record. So be mindful of that and help other people understand that. It's just not going to go away.
I can say my tip would be figure out where you are and what's the next step you need to take. And I'm referring this specifically in housing. So if you are renting and you want to become a homeowner, what's the first step that you need to take? Is it that you have no savings, that you need to save for a down payment? Is that you've got not very good credit, that you need to, you know, work on that? Look at where am I at, and then find those resources. And we've listed so many today that are available to the public to help you to take that next leap. So if it is credit, if it is savings, if it is working with, you know, past evictions and how Utah Community Action through Heather might be able to help fix those things, whatever it might be that is keeping you from making that step.
And my final thoughts, of course, is if you get a notice, I am going to say it again. I actually am. If you get a notice, anything remotely legal, please respond within the time frame. Accordingly, you don't have to go through Law School 101. It doesn't have to be pretty. Just get it in there. So my last final thought is just my whole normal thing, catch it upstream, try to get it before filing, remedy the filing in the instance that you do get a filing, but just document everything. Like there's no thing that should not be documented, especially when you're dealing with anything financial, anything housing, anything economics. Document, cooperate, and communicate often and frequently. So that's the best thing that you can do to help yourself and help anybody that's trying to help you, for sure.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Thank you.
It wasn't me. That's great.
Anyway, thank you so much for that insight, for your expertise, and for coming out to help our community. And thank you for participating tonight, those who are here live and for watching the recording afterward. We hope this is helpful. We're having one more on housing, on growth and expansion next month. But thank you guys so much for being here, and we so appreciate all of you.